Welcome to the War Zone. This is Scruffy Tales, and I am Scruffy. And as a year of war comes to an end, another is about to begin in this 3-day operation that is now closing in on 2 years of total war. And battle rages all across the front. Russia is pushing hard during this winter offensive of theirs, and they're gaining ground all along the front line. And we will focus on three specific parts: Kupiansk, Bakhmut, and Avdiivka. I'm sure you all know where they are. Yeah, and they are highlighted with the red circles, and we also have battles raging in the yellow boxes. And yeah, like I said, Russia, they have momentum, they are gaining ground, and Ukraine is struggling to hold the line. And our first stop will be at Kupiansk in the far north of the front line. And a quick reminder where we will find Kupiansk and that specific sector of the front. And this front line has been, for the last couple of weeks and months, to be honest, been going back and forth. The Russians have been pushing. Ukraine regains some territory, then Russia launches more assaults and grabs a field here and there. And so that's how it's been for the last couple of months and weeks. However, lately we saw a strange thing happening, as you can see on the rightmost image here at Orlyanka and Yahidne. Ukraine managed to make a strong push into the Russian lines. Highlighted here, as you can see, and we're gonna take a closer look what's going on in this section of the front. And as you can see, it is this part here, the windbreaks and what have you here, that Ukraine has made a strong push along towards the east, and they have pushed Russia back almost to the road. And as you can see here on the satellite image, windbreaks and a small valley, same thing up here, and Russia has been forced back. Now Russia is still in control up here in the windbreaks here, but Ukraine has pushed in here, and my guess is they will try to expand south and north to get the Russians away from the valley here and to protect Ivanivka in the south. And why is this important? Well, this is the area that Ukraine managed to grab the other day, pushed up strong along this valley here, and grabbed the windbreaks here. And now they probably will try and push up here, as well as pushing in from this direction to secure this area and push the Russians away from this valley entrance as well. And why is this important? Well, as you can see, these two narrow valleys probably has a stream each in the bottom, lead into this much larger valley system with rivers and streams. And this is what Russians are after, because down here they can maneuver quite freely and not have to cross the wide open fields. They don't have to fight along narrow windbreaks all over the place that are easily defended. Here is much better terrain to be fighting in, because you get away from the wide open fields. You can find cover on a much wider front, and so on. So the Russians, they want to get into this big valley, because this one goes basically all the way west towards Kupiansk, which is the ultimate goal. And so that is why it's really important that Ukraine made this push and secured this entrance to the valley. And that is why I think they will try and do the same over here as well. And over here, the Russians are in the trees and in the windbreaks over here, and they want to reach this section of the valley. So this is a good start for Ukraine, pushing the Russians away from the valley system. And I think what they will try next is repeat this success here, because that will keep the Russians away from the big valley. And if they can't get into the big valley, they can't reach Kupiansk. And next we will take a look at Synkivka, where the Russians have made a couple of attempts to assault the town with armored vehicles, which has been highlighted in social media of late. So I figured we would focus on Synkivka, since that seems to be what everyone's talking about. And right, so here we have Synkivka on the Deepstatemap and on the satellite image. So this is the terrain that we're talking about. You have a big forest, and right outside of the forest you have the town itself with some trees, gardens, what have you, and wide open farmland. So the Ukrainians are holding the town of Synkivka, and the Russians have decided that they need that town in order to push beyond this point, maybe to outflank the Ukrainians in the woods, or maybe they feel they can't push through the woods if the Ukrainians are holding Synkivka. So in the videos we've seen of the assault on Synkivka, we've seen 2 tanks and 2 BMPs pushing out from the forests, crossing the big open fields, trying to reach Synkivka. And it's been 2 tanks, 2 BMPs, and one of the tanks, the lead tank, has a mine roller up front. So the Russians clearly expect to push through a minefield in order to reach the town. And what happens is that one by one they get taken out, either by mines, anti-tank guided missiles, or whatever. All 4 vehicles get destroyed, and then the Ukrainians calls in cluster munitions to deal with any survivors leaving the vehicles. And we even see Russians on foot leaving the vehicles, heading for this small wooded area, this small patch of trees located here right next to all the vehicles. And so they call in cluster munitions to deal with anyone still alive, which is what you use cluster munitions for. It's not designed to take out trenches like everyone thought earlier this summer. That annoyed the shit out of me, that everyone thought that cluster munitions would just wipe out Russians in trenches. No, that's not what you use it for. Anyway, so this assault failed. All 4 vehicles got destroyed, and unsure how many Russians actually made it back alive to Russian lines. And let's see, there we go. And so here we have the tank with the mine roller. Came down this road here, came around the patch of woods and got this far, and then it blew up. If it hit a mine, or if it was a missile that took it out, not sure. I think it was a mine. You can easily make create delayed fuses, so even if you hit a mine, it will then detonate once you have moved past it with the mine roller. So more than likely a mine that took that one out. And this is the patch of woods, this is the tank, patch of woods, this is where the tank got destroyed. So they came down this way here and moved around here. Now let's see if we can find this patch of woods on a more zoomed out image. So here we have patch of woods. Take a look at this. This is the woods, and this is where the tank got destroyed, the lead tank. And here we have the town of Synkivka. And as you can see, the Russians are not far away from reaching the outskirts of the town itself. Take a look, roughly 100 meters from where the tank got destroyed, the lead tank, to where a BMP could have deployed troops in an assault on the first couple of buildings of the town itself. So yes, we see the footage of the Russians storming and the attack failing, but goddamn, they are close. So they rush down this road here at speed, try to get around the trees here, and then they need to just push on for 100 meters. That's not far if you're in a vehicle, to reach here where you can start to deploy troops, gain a foothold in the buildings, hopefully, and then you can send in more vehicles to support the assault. So yes, it looks like the Russians completely botched. Well, they did botch it, but as you can see, it makes sense. They weren't that far off from the Ukrainian lines. So that explains why Russia has tried this assault a couple of times, because they are damn near close to reaching the town coming down this way here. There's only one problem if you're the Russians. It is that you only have 2 roads where you can send in your vehicles from. If you want to storm the town down here, you're gonna have to do it with vehicles. Otherwise, you're gonna have to do it on foot. And as we saw in the video, the Ukrainians have cluster munitions ready to deal with infantry on foot, and they probably have machine guns and stuff all over the place down here. So crossing here on foot is not an option, at the moment at least. So the Russians, they need to come down either this way or come down this way with vehicles, try and take the Ukrainians by surprise and storm in and gain a foothold in these buildings. But with drones being all over the place in this war, I mean, as soon as the Russians are coming down this road here and cutting through the woods here, the Ukrainians will know that that's happening. Same if they're coming down this way or this way. And this over here, they are wide open. They will be sniped by missiles, artillery, and what have you before they even reach the trees down here. So this is the Russians' best bet. That is why they've tried this a couple of times. But I'm pretty sure drones will be spotting them as soon as they are up here at the crossroads. So while the Russians are charging along the road, the Ukrainians can prepare and let the artillery know, get the cluster munitions ready, the Russians are coming. And any Ukrainians down here holding the front line, as it were, will also be notified well in advance that Russians are coming. So yeah, the Russians really only have one option to launch an assault on the town, and that is with vehicles. And the vehicles have to come down this one road, and obviously the Ukrainians will spot them early on with the help of drones. And as we can see here, here we have a couple of vehicles destroyed. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vehicles came down the road here and tried to take the shortest route towards the town, making use of cover. Probably tried to come down this way, or maybe even this way, relying on the trees to give them cover. But you know, more than likely, heavily mined this entire area here. So they struck mines the moment they left the road, and then we saw this other attempt where the Russians tried to come down this way and struck mines all over the place here. But we have a vehicle down here, and it's a bit unclear if this is a Ukrainian vehicle or Russian. But this one here is, you know, down here. So if this was another Russian assault, that is really close to reaching the town. Unless it's a Ukrainian vehicle that has been destroyed at some other point in time. So I think it's pretty well established that this area here in yellow is mined to hell and back. Russia probably can't get through this minefield, and even if they do, there will be anti-tank teams hidden all over the place ready to engage them and be supported with artillery to stop Russian assaults coming down this way. So if this area here, the yellow, is a dead end, quite literally for the Russians, their only option is to push through the woods. But as you can see, it's contested area here. This here green patch there, it's the woods here. They need to push down here and gain control of the woods down here. So if they can do that, then they maybe get options in pushing across the open terrain. But that's risky business if they want to try and do that on foot. Maybe they can secure the forest and tree line, and at night send out the sappers and engineers to clear the road of mines, because then they can come down here, move along here, and reach the stretch of road if they manage to clear the mines during the night. If they eventually gain control of this area here, that might be an option. Because if they manage to do that, gain control of the woods here, and like I said, I really need a new headset. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so they grab here and at night try and clear the road of mines with the engineers. Then they could perhaps try and get vehicles down this way to avoid the mines and hit these locations. But they do have another option, and that is, you can see this road here. It will demand of them to grab a bunch of territory in the woods, obviously, but there is a road here, and if they can secure that road, then they can bypass the big minefields up here and try and get into town from this way. And as you can see, they're not that far off from being able to pull it off, because take a look at this. This is the road I was talking about. And if we take a look further into the forest, you have a white line going past here. That's a road. We have a road here and over here, another white line, another road through the forest. Take a look, continues down here. So I believe that these two roads here in the middle of the woods link up with the road down here, right? So, and you have this patch here, open, is a piece of farmland, I think, in the middle of the forest. That's this one. So, and you have a bit of open terrain here, right? So this is where you have these two roads that could allow the Russians to outflank the big minefields. And they are almost able to secure the first one, right? So a slight push south might give the Russians the ability to get vehicles down this road, coming down this way, and reach the road here in order to bypass Ukrainian defenses. We'll see if they pull that one off. Hopefully not. But I think that might be Russia's best chance of grabbing the town. They need to put some focus in the woods to secure this road so that they can send the vehicles around the big minefields that are currently preventing them from launching an assault from the north. And otherwise, yeah, I don't know what else they can do. If they come down this way, here, that's obviously mined. Going out here is obviously also death sentence. Um, but like I said before, why not try and come down this way? If they can send out sappers and engineers at night to try and demine the road here. Maybe then they can reach this location. And we know, or the Russians know, we know, that if you follow the road, the dirt road, you can at least get down here without hitting mines, right? That's here at the fork in the road here. So they can get all the way down here without hitting mines. Why not try and cross through the wooded area to get out behind it? Maybe there isn't as many mines here. Uh, probably is even more mines here than up here, but you never know. So that might be something they could try. I don't know. But there's one problem with going through this area, and that is um, these lines. Right? You see here? These are trench lines. There are trenches all over the place here. So if you cut in with the vehicle here, you do run the risk of getting stuck if you slide into the to the trenches. But it also it's a bit isolated for sure, yeah. But you could potentially get vehicles down here, unload troops into these trenches, and get them here, and then launch a night attack, potentially across the open terrain. But you know, night vision, cluster munitions, what have you, would probably put an end to that. But still, it gives the Russians options, even if they're not good options. So we might see them try something stupid like that to get troops into these trenches, wait for the cover of night to try and cross here in the dark. Maybe, who knows? Right, that's all we have with Kupiansk and what's going on in the north. We're now going to move on to Bakhmut. That has become a Ukrainian classic at this point. And quickly remind ourselves where Bakhmut is located. And yeah, moving on. And we are gonna be starting with taking a look at Bohdanivka. We have Bakhmut here, the outskirts, Ivanivske. And so yeah, we're gonna be taking a look at Bohdanivka. And the Russians have had quite some successes over the last couple of days. Managed to break into town and grab buildings here, pushed across the marshes and river, grabbed the windbreak and pushed into the windbreaks here. And take a look, on the 25th and on the 26th, they pushed up here, trying hard to push into the forest because they want the forest. And on the 28th, pushed up here because they really want the forest, because if they grab the forest, they can bypass the Ukrainians in the town, grab, if it's a farm or whatever it is, school maybe, I don't know, grab the forest, follow the windbreak, and do the same here, because if they grab this, the Ukrainians are outflanked in town, and this is high ground, so the Russians can shoot down into town from this elevated position. So this is what the Russians are after. But 28th, take a look on the 29th. Ukraine launches a counterattack, pushes the Russians out of the forests, and they even contest this windbreak now. And if you take a look at this, the Russians had begun to push into where this had said. Take a look. They managed to push down into this slope, gaining the windbreak here so they could really open fire into town. But Ukraine has denied them this. There's probably a Russian still down here, but the Ukrainians have managed to make this contested area, and that's good. And so yeah, this is where the Russians are currently at, outside of Bohdanivka. They're in the town up here, and the Ukrainians has pushed up along this windbreak, pushed from the forests towards the windbreak up here, and pushed into the windbreak here, and forced the Russians back from these crucial points. And the Ukrainians now want to continue pushing into this windbreak here. This is super important because as long as the Russians have this windbreak, they can support their troops in the town, making it really difficult for the Ukrainians holding these buildings to properly defend the town from Russian assaults. And here you can see why. This is the windbreak that the Russians are currently holding, and here is where Ukraine has been pushing in to force the Russians back. And this and here is this area. And remember, Russians used to also have this stretch here. That's here. So from this position, take a look. The Russians can fire down into town all day long. So that is why it's so crucial for Ukraine to push in here and force the Russians back. Because if the Russians are up here and trying to attack from here, take a look. Let's see if I can make this work. So if the Russians are attacking down this way against Ukrainians holding the positions here, if the Russians are up here with machine guns, tanks, or what have you, they can pinpoint a Ukrainian stronghold and just hammer this building or whatever building with as much firepower as possible, making it so much easier for the Russians in town to move from building to building to building, being properly supported from the high ground. As you can see here, this is Bohdanivka. This is what the town looks like. As you can see here, the town follows one main street. And this is what it looks like. So if the Russians are up here firing to town, I mean, if the Ukrainians are holding this compound, and this compound is causing a lot of trouble for the Russians, they can't get past this building. And then the Russians on the high ground starts firing on this building with a concentrated effort, and it just gets obliterated. And they can sit up here and guide artillery and mortars or drone strikes or whatever, and this building just gets pounded to bits. Probably already a reality considering what towns look like after Russia has bombarded them, but they just suppress this building, and that would, leave any Russians in the town. They don't have to storm this building. They can just move past it, send in some troops to secure it once the shooting is over, and then move on. It's super important for Ukraine to push the Russians out of this windbreak, and equally so, it's super important for the Russians to hold this position and not be forced back, because they know if they can hold on to here, then they can blast any building in town, causing trouble for the troops trying to push through and secure the town itself. Next stop is between Bakhmut and Bohdanivka. It is the small valley west of the dirt track, where Russia is trying to bypass the ridgeline to reach a forest, and that forest is super important. It gives Russia a lot of options, but they hit the snag along the way, you might say. And as you can see here, on the 25th, they pushed in here and were really close to gaining a foothold in the forest. But on the 29th, Ukraine pushed Russia back. And before this, Russia even had this part of the valley. They pushed into the valley and up this small hill and were in the forest, but Ukraine managed to push them back, securing this high ground and completely securing the forest. Russia then pushed back along the ridge here into this area, which I've been told is I've been told, what others have said, is a cemetery. Quite a macabre location for a battlefield, but it is what it is. So Russia pushed into the cemetery, and Ukraine has now launched a counterattack and pushed Russia back. And the reason why this is super important, if we take a look at this image from an earlier video of mine, Russia had the dirt track, and then what they want to do is push along the ridge to gain this forest here, because this forest here gives them a lot of options if they control it. What they can do is to begin outflanking Ukrainian troops defending Bohdanivka along these windbreaks. They can also continue along this windbreak here to reach this big forest, and then they can threaten the next town over here. And also, if they have the forest here and the valley and the ridges and the high ground here, they can push south to threaten Ivanivske. And in order to reach the forest, they first need to grab what I thought was a village at first, but it is apparently a cemetery. And they need to grab the cemetery because it's right on the ridge of the valley. And once they have that, they can then begin to push into the forest. But like we saw, Ukraine has launched a counterattack into the cemetery, and this is where the crucial battle is taking place at the moment. So here you have the dirt track, racing bana, as it says in Swedish, and as you can see here, and the Russians have pushed up along the ridge and into the cemetery. So they've followed the ridge line here, all the way over here, and this is where we're fighting right now. And currently, Russia has control of this part of the cemetery. You got some buildings here, buildings over here, and this is wide open spaces here, flat grassland. So they only have one real approach, and this is this way here. Same thing goes for the Ukrainians. My guess is they pushed in from here, from the crossroad here, gained access to the trees, and pushed into Russian positions through the trees here, and then also into the cemetery proper. If Ukraine wants to push Russia out of the cemetery completely, their best bet is to continue along the trees here and gain access to the buildings and gain control of this area. Because if the Russian soldiers holding the cemetery down here, if they are outflanked up here, then they have nowhere to go except crossing the wide open grassland, and this is in a direct line of sight from Ukrainian troops holding the forest. So if Ukraine can grab this area here, then any Russians left here will be completely cut off from any assistance, and they will perish one by one, basically. Right, so that's why the cemetery is very important for the battlefield at large, basically. Because if Russia can push through the cemetery and can begin to assault the forest, they can outflank Bohdanivka and they can outflank Ivanivske. So if Ukraine can hold here in the cemetery, then Ivanivske is all that much safer, and they actually have a decent chance of being able to hold Bohdanivka and push the Russians back if they hold the cemetery. And next stop is Avdiivka. And in case some of you have no clue where Avdiivka is, it's right smack in the middle of the red circle. You can see how the Russians have pushed out in an attempt to surround the city. So that's what's going on here. This is the location of Avdiivka. And to start things off, let's highlight the fact that President Zelensky visited Avdiivka. And take a look at this. You have this here in the background, this yellow pipeline. I actually found it on the satellite images. This is the pipeline going over the road, right? Here we go. This is the crossroad. You can see the yellow pipeline, right? That is down here. This is the coke plant. This is the slag heap. This is the front line with the water treatment plant 2 kilometers away from the pipeline. So President Zelensky visited the troops on the front, quite literally on the front, and he was only 2 kilometers away from Russian soldiers. Imagine if the Russians had known that, they would have bombed the hell out of this area. Zelensky is surrounded by some pretty good and decent protection details, since the Russians had no clue that Zelensky would be 2 kilometers away from Russian soldiers. Anyway, moving on. A couple of days ago, we saw how the Russians made a strong push into the suburbs here after they had earlier this month secured the outskirts of the suburbs. So they pushed in hard, and then Ukraine pushed them back, quite sensibly so, because this is a big threat. And then Russia managed to push in south here along around the water treatment plant. So what I think happened was that Russia pushed down south into the suburbs. This headset, Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. Anyway, the Russians pushed in here, and this gave them an opportunity to outflank the Ukrainians in the water treatment plant. Ukraine pushed back north, but too late. It allowed the Russians to outflank the water treatment plant and exploit the situation, and they are now threatening the woods here. So I think the water treatment plant, it's listed as contested, but I think it's in Russian control, to be honest. And they are now able to threaten Ukrainian positions south of the water treatment plant. So, as you can see, this is the terrain between the water treatment plant and the forests that are probably filled with trench lines and bunkers and foxholes. And what's important for Ukraine now is to hold this crossing between the dams, because if Russia can push down here, they can avoid the big open spaces here. So here they can advance in cover. Here they have to cross wide open spaces, just like we saw at outside of I forgot the name of the town up at Kupiansk. Jesus. Anyway, open fields is not really where you want to advance. So this is super crucial for Ukraine to hold this crossing here. But the map says that this area here is threatened and contested. So maybe what is going on is that Russia, I think Russia is more than likely in control of the water treatment plant. It's a bit of a high ground situation. They can fire across the open terrain into the tree line, and maybe, just maybe, they can follow the dams here with vehicles dashing from cover to cover to try and threaten the Ukrainian positions down here by following the shoreline in order to threaten this area here. Maybe that's what's going on, but who knows? So I'll try and explain this in this video. I tried to talk about this in my previous video, Frontline video, but my laptop just messes with my videos and just cuts segments in half and doesn't record all the audio, and it just goes haywire at times. So anyway, I'll try and make sense of it this time around. We'll see what happens. So why is Russia attacking here and not the big coke plant that everyone is talking about? Well, it's more than likely because there's certain logic to planning combat and engagements, and it comes down to how many troops you need to win a combat in, depending on the terrain. And in theory, I mean, like the saying goes, battle plans never survives contact with the enemy. But there's some logic to how you plan where and how you want to engage the enemy. And so I'm rambling. Anyway, depending on the terrain. So here we have suburbs, and I guess we can call that, it's not proper urban setting, but you know, it's more like prepared defenses with the buildings. And if you're going up against prepared defenses, that usually means you need around a 5-to-1 advantage if you want to attack. So for every enemy soldier, you need 5 friendly soldiers. So that means you can suppress the enemy and advance on their position, and also have troops ready to cover angles that you weren't really expecting. And also, as you take casualties, you will still have troops available to keep pushing and grabbing the objective. And down here you have forests, and in a forest you usually say you need a 3-to-1 advantage. So you can rely on say 2 squads to suppress the enemy, and then use a 3rd squad to outflank the enemy and go in for the kill. So that's usually what you try and achieve in a forested area. And then you have troublesome urban settings where you can have enemies at any angle. There will be booby traps all over the place. You will be stepping through doorways, and you will face the enemy will be standing 2 feet away from you, firing point blank on full auto. And in such environments, they say you need a 10-to-1 advantage, because there are so many angles to cover. So you need all these troops. You need, for every enemy you're facing, you need 10 friendlies, so you can cover all the potential angles where you will be shot from. And also, you expect to take so many casualties in this environment, because you can't cover all the angles. And there are so many places where there will be booby traps and ambushes, so you will take massive casualties. And to accommodate all these problems, you need a 10-to-1 advantage. So, using this math, this logic, this how many troops you need depending on the environment, why would Russia be attacking through the factory when they can go through the suburbs and the forests and the suburbs over here. And as you can see, it's this terrain continues down here with suburbs, maybe some warehouses and storage facilities, but you know, it's relative easy going compared to fighting your way through this very easily defended fortress that the factory of this size is. And also down here you have the city proper, again proper urban setting, just as hellish of a battlefield as fighting your way through a factory. So obviously, if you want to spend the least amount of manpower, the least amount of resources, the least amount of ammunition, you avoid the factory and the city and go through the suburbs and the forests. And what can Russia achieve by doing this? They can reach this dotted line here, which is the main big supply route leading into Avdiivka. Down here is where Zelensky was, by the way. And so what the Russians can do here is really kill two birds with one stone if they reach this location and cut this supply line. They not only cut off Avdiivka from supplies, they also goddamn headset. Where was I? Yeah, they also isolate the factory. And if they cut off the factory from reinforcements, then they just need to wait it out. They don't have to enter it. Eventually, the troops in here will run out of food, water, and eventually they will run out of ammunition and what have you. And then the fight is over. Russia does not need to enter the factory. They just need to cut it off from supplies, from reinforcements. What they do need to do is to apply pressure so Ukraine can strike out from the factory. So Russia will try and gain control over these buildings here. They will open fire on the factory. They will bomb it to contain the Ukrainians holed up in it, so the Ukrainians can't move out from the factory and strike at Russians trying to bypass it. So this is why the Russians are attacking here. This is why the Russians are attacking here. It makes sense. It's logical. Sorry. And there's no point for them to attack through the factory. There's no point for them to try and push through the city proper when they can attack through the suburbs and cut the vital supply line that keeps the city going. And by cutting the supply line, they also isolate the factory, cutting the factory off from any contact with the city and the troops in general. So hopefully this stays in the video this time around. And this is the logic behind attacking through this area instead of just launching an all-out assault on the factory. And that's it. That's all I have for you this time around. Yeah, like I said, there's fighting going all over the place along the front line. At Robotyne, the Russians are gaining ground that they lost during the summer offensive. And they're trying to push into Novomykhailivka, and at Marinka they are expanding their control around that town, or what remains of the town. And so, but I've chosen these locations for you know, a more closer look at what's going on. So hopefully Russia is only managing Pyrrhic victories, expending rather troops and ammunition vehicles, that by springtime they won't have the resources required to hold on to the territories that they have managed to gain during these winter months. With that said, go på marsch, Ukraine, give them hell.